Hi everyone, if you love King's Indian games and you love queen sacrifices, then you're in the right place. This is Danya Naroditsky doing his thing online. This was played on chess.com, 3 minutes apiece here. Let's see what happened. So we had d4 from white, knight f6, pawn c4, g6, and now after knight c3, you don't know if black's going to play a Grunfeld with d5, but after bishop g7, we've got clarity because now e4, d6, this is the starting position of the King's Indian defence. So knight f3 played, castles here, now bishop to e2, pawn e5, this is all the main line, castles from white, and now knight c6 is the main move here, then white closes the centre very often, game goes on. But instead we had this knight a6 variation, so black actually wants to bring this knight to c5 soon, where it then pressures the centre here. So we had rook e1 played, comes to a good file, lets this bishop tuck back in a lot of lines. c6 now from black, standard move, taking some space in the centre, opening the queen at times. Pawn d5 now from white, and that move's not forced, you can play different manoeuvring plans, but this is one that seeks to clarify the pawn structure, take some space, and then start playing on the queen side. That's very often where white wants to play. So we had takes on d5, pawn recaptures, c-pawn by the way, because you want to open this c-line, start getting counterplay against the black threats on the king side. The knight now comes to c5, hits that pawn, and the queen defends here. So knight h5, standard move, looking to free up the f-pawn. The bishop develops to e3 here, and now knight f4 played. Danya's actually not too worried if black wants to give up this bishop for knight. That wouldn't be so advantageous in this position here. So instead this bishop just tucks back to f1 here, and by the way, you'd never want to take this one because then this dark square bishop becomes way too powerful. So this one tucked back. We now had bishop to g4, pressures this knight, but knight d2 is a good move. It starts to make this one actually look a bit silly because soon you're just going to kick it with f3 and you've actually helped this one improve, come round to c4 here. So rook c8 was now played, lining up against the queen, and here white missed an opportunity to take a good advantage. So if you go b4 straight away, if the knight drops back to d7, well, you've now blocked the bishop's retreat. So after f3, you have to come to this ugly square. g4 could even be trapping it. You know, it is trapping it, although you have to be a bit careful of the counterplay black can get when you open up your king. And if instead of dropping back to d7 here, you go for this one, well, then the queen can actually take. Yes, black takes here, but you lose a pawn at the end of the line. The white counterplay is very good here, better for white in this position. So b4 was the way to go, but f3 was played first. Now the bishop drops to d7, and suddenly this one's not so good because after you spin in here, you're defended that one now with the bishop, and this knight's actually under a lot of pressure. So a4 was played instead for that reason. Pawn f5 from Danya. This rook now came to the c file. Queen g5 looks for that play against the king, so it's sidestepped to h1 here, and now queen h5 played, nudges out of this pin against the bishop, and also sets up some ideas then of moving the knight into h3 if the moment's correct. You know, sometimes this pawn could be sensitive, those kind of attacking ideas here. So b4 now played, the knight came to a6, it does hit this pawn, but after that one was defended, now the knight's looking pretty miserable on the edge of the board, so that is a risk for black in this position here. So bishop h6 now from Danya, again looking to activate that piece. It was just staring at its own pawn. And now here white should play knight to b5 as the best move. White goes knight c4, very similar idea of attacking this pawn, but this is so much more accurate because now you open the c file immediately for the trade of rooks. And so say black takes here, recaptures, so that you can then go rook f6 to defend this one. Well, white can actually take this one because after the rook recaptures, you go b5 and now the c line's open. This knight's actually got nowhere to go. You know, beautiful attack for white, completely winning here. But because this other knight comes to c4, similar idea, but now you can go rook f6 and the c line's blocked, so you haven't got the same attacking ideas. So knight b5 was now played, hits that pawn again, but it's a tiny bit slower here. Danya gets to take on e4, generate that kingside counterplay. We had pawn recaptures, This rook now came to the f-file, so he's abandoning his queenside, he's going for the throat, and white got spooked at this point, drops the queen back to d1 here. Actually better would have been, say, rook to e1. Yes, you now come off the c-file at this point, but that pawn's actually caving in, and you also protect this bishop in some lines, it is being x-rayed by this one. But after the queen comes to d1 here, trying to trade, the problem is that the bishop can now kick it, it comes into e1, and then Danya can play this beautiful clearing move. If you want to pause and look for it, please do so here. So the move to play is knight to h3. I did reference this one earlier, and you just open up these rooks, and now because the queen is on e1, not one of the rooks, this is actually holding the bishop here, which isn't ideal. So if you take that one, for example, which wasn't played, well, now black can do this, and this is just a good position for black, should be winning. So that's why we didn't actually have this one being taken here. Instead, we had takes on h6. Now again, taking that bishop is still actually the best move, but Danya actually plays to complicate things a bit more. The clock is also a factor in these kind of games. So he checks on f2 here, the king comes to g1, and then he just recaptures this bishop. But this does let white now get back into the game, and white is soon better in a moment, again because of this problem knight, which is sidelined on a6. So queen e3 played, again trying to trade queens. Danya's having none of it, he goes pawn g5. Now one of the knights crashes through on d6 here, and we had takes on b4 from Danya, best move. Now the rook attacks the knight, and a5 was technically the best move defending that knight there, but it actually retreats to a6, but now this rook can crash through, and white's actually doing brilliantly in this position if white doesn't hang himself. So after knight c5 here, Danya actually sets up a trap. So if that one's taken, which happens in the game, there's a big problem with it. So what white should have done here is just move away from the attack, take the pawn, game goes on, and black doesn't actually have anything concrete in this position. But because here the queen captured the knight, it's now been decoyed away from the defense of the third rank, the defense of the king. This is where Danya unleashes his thunderbolt. Again, if you want to pause and look for the move, please do so. So the move he plays here is queen takes on h2. Beautiful attacking idea. It lures this king out. You can then check on the h-file, and you can't hide back here because then we mate like this. Of course, the rook is holding the knight. So the king had to come out. This is what happened in the game. Now we had knight h1 check. Again, the only move that can be played here is takes on g4. Then we had the rook checking here. And this is the big problem. When the queen was on e3, you could actually take this rook and white was completely winning. But with the queen gone, the king has to take here. Now we check, king here, and the final killer blow was knight g3 checkmate using rooks and minor piece. I hope you enjoyed this amazing game by Danya Naroditsky. If you want to see another game between him and Alireza Firouzja, click here. Thanks very much for watching. See you soon.